Welcome to the American Intelligence Media. I am your host, Douglas Gabriel, also known as Thomas Paine and the Ass of the Globalist, which I really try to do every single day of my life. But today I have a person who is just about more in the thick of the battle than even our conclave is. We're going to talk with Christopher Earl Strunk. Now, the last time we talked with him, he was out there on the battlefield fighting for true and honest elections. And he put in some lawsuits, and he stirred the pot, and boy, did he ever get a reaction. But this time, because I think no other issue that I've ever heard in my whole life has gotten people more upset than the infanticide bill of New York State, Christopher Earl Strunk is bringing lawsuits in relationship to that. I've been seeing some notes he's sending. I had to get him on the wire, record him, and find out what he's doing. Christopher, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. I just got back from a press conference I held in Albany regarding the Judge Heard out in Utica, New York, in Northern District of New York. Utica is an old 19th century industrial town along the Erie Canal, next to the Turning Stone Indian casino, which seems to be the only industry out there in Oneida County at this point. But yes, I visited all the press in Albany, New York. I went and talked to Associated Press, to the New York Law Journal, who knew who I was. They had an actual pin up on their board in back of them. They said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Strunk." And they said, "Oh yeah." And they turned around and they looked at the pin up on the back. Now, I filed the case on Valentine's Day. You know, I normally only get involved in First Amendment issues, and I'm as an aside here, I'm actually looking at the Second Amendment issue because Andrew Cuomo, who is along with his brother Chris, is a Fordham graduate, along with John Brennan, and they all have these weird a strange look in their eyes. Okay, there's something wrong. We don't have a 25th Amendment in New York, but I wish we did, so we could actually use their words against them to get rid of them as incompetent. But nonetheless, the case was filed on the 14th. I filed it against the state of New York, against Andrew Cuomo, against the Speaker of the House of the Assembly, which is a man by the name of Hasty, and against Stuart Cousins, who is the head of the Senate. And they passed this bill on the 22nd of January, the bill which became law on the 22nd of January, called the Reproductive Health Act, which is a Jesuit reversal of words, and that it's anything but health. And that nonetheless, it allows for the state of New York to harvest third trimester babies and to allow them to enter the product into the market. And I believe there absolutely is a market for whole babies. And it runs somewhere between 30,000 and 400,000 a baby based upon the maturation. Now, I also added Warren Wilhelm Jr., who is Bill de Blasio. That's actually, his name is Wilhelm, and his name is, he changed it to de Blasio because he didn't want to seem German, which his father is. And that the mayor of New York, who came out and said, basically, New York City owns all the property and you're merely leasing, right? You know, he's come out with some real wild stuff, including 5G stuff.
Where do you get these doozies in New York? I want to know that. Like Alexandria Ocasio.
He's senior executive service, man, along with Andrew Cuomo, man. This is like a gift that doesn't keep giving. You know, your work with Michael McKibben on the senior executive services is just overwhelming. You know, I checked it out with Michael a couple of days ago. I said, Andrew Cuomo is senior executive. He took over HUD in the 90s when Cisneros, who was the Secretary of HUD, got put in prison. Right? He was actually went directly to prison. Do not pass go, do not collect 200. And Andrew Cuomo took over, and that was when Catherine Austin Fitts was tracking down the missing funds, and among other things, the laundering being done by HUD, which ended up to a huge amount of money, which is now up to around 21 trillion off in black ops money that a Dr. Skidmore out near you folks, University of Michigan, had uncovered. But nonetheless, Andrew Cuomo was part of that, and I was a HUD contractor at the time, so I know a lot about him. And plus, I know about him because I worked for his father, and that I knew how he was messing things up. And so de Blasio is there as a defendant. The city of New York is there as a defendant. Planned Parenthood is there as a defendant. They've been adequately served. And the Political Action Committee for Planned Parenthood is there, along with the Democratic National Committee and Tom Perez, our darling down there, Kirsten Nielsen of the Department of Homeland Security.
Who you scared. You scared her, with your last lawsuit, and they actually kind of sent someone to kind of be the muscle guy to scare you, but you weren't scared.
I still have Tom Donahue. I drove by that meeting place that I was shaken down at by the guy Jim Cook. Instead of Tom Donahue, I was going to call Tom to find him out if he ever got back from Timbuktu. But I
doubt it.
But right. Well, the point though is that I wanted to see how if he was alive among the living, and
exactly.
That look, you got to have a sense of humor with all these bureaucrats, and that. I think that the plot is sticking so much. As of about a half an hour ago, the Senate voted down Trump's. They had a concurrent resolution which voted down his emergency executive order on the border, right? And that, of course, they need a 2/3 override, and I don't think they're going to get it. But nonetheless. All of this is happening, and all of this is really part of what I'm doing in front of Judge Hurd. This is about, as of Saturday, their anniversary of the 9th of March, 1933, when FDR declared a war on the emergency and implemented the Emergency Banking Relief Act, which we're still under, and ended up in Proclamation 2040. In other words, we do not have real money. We have a banking system which is under the dictatorial powers of the President and the Secretary of Treasury, and they're marching lords at the Pentagon. So Saturday, we're into the 86th year and this is part of the suit here. I'm not getting off into the weeds.
Oh, this isn't the weeds. This is actually in your lawsuit.
This is in the lawsuit, absolutely. And the thing is that I said to Judge Hurd, who's 68, I figured, I'm 72, he's 68. We all went through the church committee hearings and the CIA, the ice guns and all that sort of thing, and MK Ultra and Artichoke and blah, 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 and people jumping from buildings, we all went through that period around Watergate. We sat there glued to the testimony of all of these CIA office peek and sneakers, run by E. Howard Hunt. But this drama starts in 1973, and this is what the judge, I think, freaked out. Okay, I did a request for a temporary restraining order, and that I'm essentially saying that the governor of the state of New York, under the emergency government, has an obligation as a trustee to safeguard all government property, and that the government property includes the mother and father of the fetus and or newborn, and that Andrew Cuomo was in effect destroying government property as the trustee. Right? Now that's pretty heady stuff. No judge has ever gotten that, right? And that
it's a clever approach, though, I must admit, Christopher.
Yeah, destruction of government property. So the point is, if they're selling all of the baby parts between $30,000 and $400,000 a pop, hell, that's government property. And I'm just saying, I mean, I can get really grisly here, guys. And I don't know if you've got little gray-haired old ladies listening that they might keel over and with a heart attack, but I'll try to keep it to a low rumble here.
Okay, well, before we go there to the details, let's talk about that scumbag Cuomo. I can understand why he would vote for this. How did he get other people to vote for killing babies? And literally, these are viable babies.
Well,
that there's nothing wrong with them. That's called murder. That is not an abortion. I don't understand how. Okay, this also happened in. They're debating all this in Texas, and Ohio, and Illinois, and Virginia, and Vermont, and in some cases they're passing laws saying they can kill babies after they're even born. That's not an abortion. I don't understand how this could be happening.
Well, that's like going to the New York City school system. That's how they're killing them in the school system. You know, they put them before all these teachers, the Maoist school system, right?
Oh, I agree with that. Schools or prisons.
Yeah. Oh, my God. So what I did, and the judge, look, I don't go into court to win. I go into court to make a public record, and that people should not be, disheartened when they hear that this thing didn't win. I didn't go in to win. I went in to make a public record on issues that have never gone before any court in the past. You know, I have a organization, the privateamericancitizens.org. It's stepping back, and this is all in the court case. This is it. This is all of the papers of FDR starting in March of March 4th, the date that he gave his speech, you know, when he was sworn in on March 4th of 1933. What he did was to seize all of the property in order to save the country from collapse. And he determined all of the efforts of human beings were to be collateralized to save the property. All right? And what he said on the next day was he called for these are exhibits. This is all executive orders which create this 86-year-old emergency government. All right, that what he did was to what he's done is collateralized the entire living, breathing population in this country, and even when they're dead, just like in probate, you know, the estate goes to further collateralize the debt and the banking system. All right? So what happened is that they, and I say they, it's the Chinese who are behind this, they've been killing their babies and banging they don't want females in China. They don't want females. And that I knew, I could see how they were treating the newly born females in 1986. They banged their head up against a rock because women were considered a detriment to China as a whole, and they only wanted men. And that so there's a ratio. I've heard a ratio figure of 25 men to 1 woman as a result of 35 years of killing young females. Now, this is very controversial stuff, but you can't kill your ability to have a healthy population. After all, men do have a time clock that ticks, but what the Chinese have been doing is sending them to Africa, sending them to Australia, sending them somewhere else to have sex.
Now, this sounds like we're in the weeds. We're not in the weeds.
Okay. We're not in the weeds, but this is real.
And I want to point out,
this is underlying stuff.
This isn't a conspiracy. I've been watching this for decades and decades, and everything you're saying is true, and it's worse. The premier of China, you know, their committee, determines how many children you can have. At one point, you could have 2. At another point, you could have 1. Then you could have 2. Then you could have 1. And now they've reached zero population gain, and so they're trying to incentivize women getting pregnant in China. Now, here's the problem. This is so disgusting. Literally, if there are gray-haired people who might have a heart attack, you might want to just turn it off. But here's what happened. If you had a baby and you already had one, and it was only when you could have one, you took your baby, the new baby, and you put it in the woods for the animals to eat. Now, that became such a huge problem for civil rights and everyone in the world looking at that what did China do? They started literally taking those babies and taking their stem cells and taking their fetal tissue and taking the umbilical cord and taking even the placenta, because they're filled with immunoglobulins and they're worth a lot of money. In a hospital, they will actually buy it back from the mother after the birth. And so now we know when you set up to $400,000 for a baby, here's what happens. If you take that baby and is completely healthy, every organ can be harvested. That's going to give you about $40,000. But if you take the baby and you torture the baby as you take one organ at a time, the adrenochrome, which is an adrenaline that is released into the blood, people believe that this blood can then cure all illness, keep you young, and basically it's the elixir of life. And so they started literally selling this stuff to people until it became so common that they started making pills out of fetal tissue. And this has been a common practice for a long time in China. And now, recently, they've been discovering they've captured, just 2 days ago, I think it was, 2,000 pills of human flesh that they had in South Korea that were made in China. This has been going on a long, long time. When we tell you that China, one of its big businesses is organ harvesting, and basically they use humans as slaves until they die, and then, yes, they take their flesh and they use that for not only with agriculture, but they use it in a variety of ways, and they also literally put it in pills for people to take. Now, these pills have been tested. Every bacteria known to mankind is in these pills, the ones they just found, as well as hepatitis and many other illnesses. If you take them, you could die. Not to mention the fact that if you eat human flesh and you're a human, you will get this horrible, horrible disease. And I'm not going to go into that, even though Christopher knows all about that and is a lot more than I do. So the point is, he's not exaggerating. And here in America, I didn't understand this until I became completely outraged with the fact that so many states think that they can make murder of a baby legal. And that got me so upset I had to look into it. And now I found that, yes, a baby can bring you literally $500,000 if you torture the baby just right as you are murdering it, either at the very last minute before birth or even after birth now, because now they say, it's okay, let the baby be born. Let the mother hold the baby. Let the mother decide whether the baby she's going to let the baby live. And if she decides not to let the baby live, it's completely her decision to kill that baby, which is illegal. No doctor can do that. No one can do that. And literally, without any repercussions, here's what I say. The person that couldn't abort that baby, a healthy baby, before term, before the baby is born, we're taking the life of the wrong person. That baby, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands of people lined up to get a baby, to adopt a baby in America.
Including John Roberts, by the way. Yep, including John Roberts.
Exactly, right. As we know, and his corruption, and also the Obamas and their corruption in getting their babies. But what I'm saying is, this is disgusting, and I want to salute you for writing these lawsuits and for contesting these things and to go after these scumbags who I don't think deserve to hold any political position. But then what about the other people who voted for this? What about the Democrats? It seemed to be a very big Democratic thing. The demon rats, as I like to call them. What about the Democrat contingency that believes this is a very, very good thing? I'm sorry. To me, that's the end of the Democrat Party, because that's not a party of democracy. It's not a party of even socialism or fascism. That's just a party of sheer communist murder. So I'm sorry. I had to give my little diatribe there. But what Christopher is telling you folks, it's all true. I've never known anything that he ever told me, because I check out all this stuff because he tells me so many amazing things. I have to check it out. And when I do, it's always true. So what he's telling you, he might not be giving you the passion that I'm giving you about why he's fighting this, but he fights these things as a real warrior, and he puts his whole life on the line for it. So again, I'm saluting you. I'm saluting the work that you and your friends do. And please continue telling us about this most pathetic and inhuman law that you are fighting.
Well, it's certainly about the money, but it's certainly about power, and that the transformation of power by the Chinese. So the Chinese are basically working their operations through Central and South America, and that just like they're working through Africa in the very same way, they send over military trained people in those continents, and that they're interested as an investment in the rape, multiple rapes, and the women showing up pregnant as they cross the southern border. And then, of course, the United States, through its care program, essentially take care of the fetuses and everything else. All right, that's part of the whole catch. It's not catch and release, especially if the woman's pregnant. Right? So, Homeland Security and Kirsten Nielsen is about the collection of fetal tissue. Right?
Wow,
that's and of course I'm interested in that. All my my temporary restraining order was to prevent anybody in the state of New York from operating under color of their Reproductive Health Act, which would allow the harvesting of third trimester in actual babies who have been born through the breech, the dilation of the mother in pregnancy. And that Cuomo, being a Jesuit-trained lowlife, he came out about a year and a half ago saying he was going to dedicate all electric power at Niagara Falls for the generation of Bitcoin. The guy's an idiot. It's all made up. It's all phony baloney to begin with. But he was going to shut down all the electric power, thinking that he was going to generate Bitcoin using Niagara Falls Electric. So the point is, there's 21 million Bitcoins with Satoshi Nakamoto, knock on the door. That there's only 21 million, and most of those are harvested or controlled through in the European Union and in conjunction with J.P. Morgan. But again, what sort of mentality would push a third term abortion and infanticide? What kind of thinking? Oh, that's Andrew Cuomo, man. That's Andrew Cuomo. The guy is sick. He is sick. So, but when you look at the Tom Perez, who get the kickback on all of this stuff going on the borders, my take on the Democrats and the Republicans, the rhinos in particular, is that they have a cash flow coming through the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which comes through Mexico in conjunction with the Chinese, and through the drug trade and through the exotic products trade. So, with all this in mind and wanting to essentially enforce the anti-trafficking executive order by Trump on the 18th or 21st of 2017, which was renewed in 18 as one of the 31 existing executive orders. I think there's 32 now with his order down on the border. But the point is, I wanted to impact that, but I know all of the judges are pretty much I have to watch what I'm saying here because I am before a judge. They are influenced by mainstream thinking. They don't like to get into thinking which would change the paradigm of how a judge must view a case. I'm arguing that under the emergency government, and we're into the 86th year, that the governor is the trustee of all human beings and all property resident within the state that they are the governor over, and that they must render up to the banking system as the collateral, all the birth certificates and all that, which was put in place in 35. All of that is hypothecated, and that's what underlies all of the mortgages. And I say that as a fact, folks. That's a fact. I am working with some pretty heavy hitters, and who have proven that. And that so that every time there's a birth and there's a registration and there's a birth certificate, it's not easy to kill the newborn. But when there is no birth certificate, they can kill that with with impunity. Right?
Oh, now I see your
So
point. I see why you took that tact. Because you're considering humans materials, because that's what they consider us. That's what the U.S. Fed considers us. It's like when you go in the Army, they
well,
call you a GI. That means government issue. You're just simply
right,
nothing more than a
government
material.
property.
You're property. That's all
Well,
you
that's
are.
right. That started in the 1863 Revenue Act, which Solomon Chase and Lincoln were having a hard time figuring out how they were going to how they were going to raise taxes. So basically, the 1863 Revenue Act says that all government employees pay a tax. Of course, the largest number of government employers were who? The Union Army. And they were paying for their own bullets. Well, that still remains. So basically what happens is that under the emergency government, we are all, except those who have ceased to be the surety. I've become the human being. And what happens is that when somebody's born and they're registered by their mother as a vessel in commerce, they then own the human being. It's the name which is registered on the birth certificate, which owns the human being, and the human being is responsible to pay the taxes of the government employee, which is the name registered in commerce. All right. So, everybody registered with a birth certificate is a public citizen, right? Public, and therefore has to pay taxes.
I was going to say,
it goes back to 80.
And then has their share of the taxes placed upon them. The moment that they're born,
Right.
25 trillion or whatever it is now, they divvy it up to us citizens, and basically we don't even know what war that's paying for. We don't even know what money that was for, and in fact, the money they collect from us in taxes doesn't even pay off the debt to the Federal Reserve. Now let's go back for a second. Let's look at the Tavistock. I'm going to call it the Tavistock attitude of scumbag Cuomo. Now, how can anybody be a leader and lead people down such a path of perdition unless they have had some type of brainwashing, some type of Tavistock brain bleaching where they can't really have any moral thoughts anymore, and then they can stand up and say, yeah, let's kill the babies, it's no problem. Because why? They're not taxpayers yet. And if they were taxpayers, then Cuomo, who's chasing all the taxpayers out of New York, would then charge them more taxes. But as it is, his elites, that would be the Planned Parenthood and everybody who buys tissue from them, who, by the way, the Congress, the Democrats, gave $500 million to Planned Parenthood, and they turned around and gave $50 million back to the Democrats. And exactly the process you're talking about, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So, do they have to be Tavistock brainwashed, brain bleached to stand up and be a leader like Cuomo and literally lead people into some of the, in the past, there were human sacrifices, lots of them, to Moloch, to all, the Toltec gods, all these different gods, right? And that was in the past. Hopefully, I thought we'd evolved beyond that. It looks as if we've taken a huge step back to human sacrifice, all for the sake of money, for the sake of the elites who are buying this from Planned Parenthood, and it's being supported by Tavistock brainwashed people, completely brain-bleached people like Cuomo. I can't see any other way of looking at this. Is there some other reason why a leader like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez could say, yeah, let's kill the babies, or the governor in Virginia, or how can anybody say this? I can't comprehend it unless their brains have been completely manipulated.
Well, look, it's nihilism in one word, nihilism. You got to destroy it to save it, and that you've got to go back at the time of Marx. Marx was in effect a nihilist, and he was working with later on. You have Bukharin, who was heavily studied by Deng Xiaoping. If in fact China is anything, it's because of Bukharin, right? Mm-hmm. And that you have the nexus between Stalin, FDR, and Mussolini, who were all working together. They're fascist corporate state socialism, and that they spend most of their time to push the left and right BS. There is no such thing, but that it is. I'm just sorry to say that we're into we're into reducing human beings to product. And nihilism, it's nihilistic. Actually, nihilism is sort of culturally tame compared to what they're doing, but it's cannibalism. And that and I don't want to get into the history of this, but it goes back to the time of Marx, who was run by the Jesuits, who was trained by a Jesuit priest in Trier, and who ended up being the Black Pope at the time of the Lincoln administration, and was called for the death of Lincoln through the Knights of the Golden Dawn, etc., and Albert Pike's crowd. But look, this goes before Tavistock. This goes directly to the heart of the Jesuits' destruction of the Reformation, and that, I don't separate it out. Tavistock was latecomer as far as I'm concerned, but certainly the Germans, the whole Holy Roman Empire, that whole thing is real. And now we're definitely into the weeds here, Tyler. You haven't blown a whistle. But
that's okay. That's not so far into the weeds, because the Romans we're still living in the shadow of the Romans. And
still, absolutely.
I mean, you're in the legal thing, because I call you my legal eagle, and you're fighting. you're fighting Roman law.
I'm a buzzard. I'm no
a legal buzzard. I like that even better. But now, okay, so I'm going to ask this question. What you just said was absolutely profound. It took you saying it a few times for me to get it. Human beings are product, as long as you can take them before the moment of birth and the tax thing sets in. So they're product. They're chattel. They're kind of like Sharia law, the way that they handle women.
Exactly.
Women are low.
Exactly.
Women are
That's
below.
why communists get along with Sharia law real well. Man. The Catholic Church. The Catholic Church loves Sharia law, man, because it's product, and they're having a real slump in their economic revenues.
Well, I want to point out that Sharia law, when it lists your valuables, underneath your camels and your stock and your chattel is your
wives and children.
Your wives and children.
Yep.
Sharia law, something out of the Dark Ages, or certainly not beyond the Middle Ages, and certainly not beyond the Renaissance. I know the Catholic Church did the same things, and I'm glad you pointed that out. And I pointed out just a minute ago that you don't have to go back far to find human sacrifice. But the point is, I thought we had really evolved beyond that. This is just disturbing, though, but I can see how really they're not even looking at it as killing. They're looking at it as product. Either they can make money off of it.
Harvesting. Yeah.
So it's a business proposition. These aren't humans.
Right.
This is chattel. These are products. And these products can bring $500,000 for a little tiny, 6-pound baby. Well, that's almost the same amount of money you can make off your enriched uranium and enriched plutonium, which is what we just found out the Queen and Vladimir Putin were fighting about here in America over the uranium. But now we find out the true reason why the Democrats don't want to stop Planned Parenthood. Now, I want to tell you a quick story about Planned Parenthood. I was in charge of a school with, almost 400 students, all of them in, I'm not going to say the city, but in a certain city. And these were African-American girls, and they had all had 1 to 5 babies. And I was in charge of that school, right?
What?
Yeah.
What? 1 to 5?
Yeah, some of them had 5 babies, and they were in high school, yes.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Now, I'm going to tell you why. Guess why? Because a doctor must be present in a Planned Parenthood facility before you can give out birth control pills. That's the law. There are no doctors in Planned Parenthood. That's the reason doctors aren't murdering these babies in Planned Parenthood. It's just these nurses and assistants and people who have no medical license. So all of these girls would tell me, I'd say, I don't get it. Did you just like babies? I'm joking around with them. You just love babies or what? They go, no, Dr. Gabriel. No. We all take the pill. It doesn't work for any of us. We all get pregnant.
It's a placebo.
Yeah, they want us to come back so they can harvest the baby. They don't say harvest, so they can take the babies. But some of us refuse to go. And so I applauded them, and I said, that's great. That's wonderful. I'm sad to hear that. But you know what? That explains a whole lot. Now, the Planned Parenthood facilities inside of major cities have fake placebo birth control pills. That's because they are after, through eugenics, since the time of Singer and the time, her lawyer was Bill Gates' dad, number one legal eugenist maybe in America, and the Planned Parenthood was planned to kill people. It's a society for eugenics. That's the
eugenics.
way it was founded.
It's eugenics. It's the culling the herd of the. It's what we thought was determined, the racial purity. No, that was Margaret Sanger. That was American. That was New York, my friend. New York. Margaret Sanger, it was a real eye-opener. It's interesting is that the Speaker of the House, or the Speaker of the Assembly, and the head of the Senate are both black, right? And Sanger wanted to kill all the black babies, right? And here you have the head of the, the Democrats control both houses in New York, and they're all black. Okay? Here you have the. Well, I'm just saying, too, it's pretty disgusting stuff. Okay, and that Margaret Sanger didn't spare any words on running to get rid of the. Wanted to create racial purity, and that's why Rosenberg, who was Jewish and came over from Hitler, sent over to meet with the eugenics society here in New York. The Nazis, they came here to get ideas, just like they went to the racial purity, the Confederate Constitution and their laws in the South. That was Democratic Party law. That was the Nuremberg Code, all right? So, which is still in place, by the way, the Nuremberg Code. So, look, now there's another aspect of this where if you look at, I always like to follow the money. It makes it less emotional. That you look at the sectors of our economy where the cash flow is. You've got the pharmaceuticals. You've got the, let's stop at the cosmetics. You've got pharmaceuticals. You've got, you've got transportation. You've got housing. You've got a lot of other things. But the government involvement really is dependent upon the corporate relationship. This is corporatism. This is corporate state socialism that we're living under. And that New York has been at that ever since Averell Harriman, the railroad magnate, and Nelson Rockefeller, the Republican, the Standard Oil magnate. New York is the empire state. It's the corporate state socialism state. And Hitler depended upon it. Actually, it was Union Bank in New York under Prescott Bush who created Hitler. Tyson Steele, he served on the board of directors as a sitting senator from the state of New York to the federal government. He was actually, during the war, on the board of directors of Tyson Steel. So the Bush family and the Blue Blood families play a role in harvesting human beings, and that they, again, the pharmaceutical industry seems to be in a big tizzy over this stuff. There was a couple killed in Toronto last year, a year and a half ago, called the Sherman family, and they produced AZT, right? And they produced Prozac. This was a knockoff, drug up there, and they were both hanging from a doorknob. Of course, they were connected to the Clinton Foundation, and I'm sure you could connect it into VeriSign and all the rest of the various corporate international networks, which are culling an annual revenue off of certain sectors of the world economy.
Oh yeah, with the AZT that was down in Australia, where Alexander Downer twice made donations to the Clinton Foundation, where all they did was skim the money so that they could get their piece of the pie and tax the AZT going into Australia, and they made $86 million off of it. That's just one
that
deal.
Went to Toronto. That went to the Sherman couple, and that in that business, I'm trying to solve crimes at the same time as I'm doing all this.
I didn't know that. I didn't know you were Columbo too. Now listen, I want to go back because
Columbo, I don't even have a trench coat. But, I feel like I'm in a trench.
Yes, you are in the trenches. I don't know anybody else who's more in the trenches than you. Now, let's go back to these families. Bill Gates proudly announced that his new green program for Africa, which gave out immunizations to boys and girls, which actually sterilized them. Now, this has been proven now. All the people who were under the green program, what he called his green program for Africa, those immunizations were filled with drugs that sterilized the children, okay? And then his GMO, he's bringing over GMOs and paying for it and getting everybody in Africa to use GMOs. And remember, the farmers in India are killing themselves by droves because the GMOs are basically destroying agriculture everywhere. It's going to happen in Africa the same way. So what does Bill Gates say? He proudly announces that his good work, his green efforts in Africa should wipe out 17% of the population in the next few years. He wanted higher numbers, and he literally brags about his eugenics. And this is disgusting that this man who pays no taxes takes the taxes he should be paying America and uses it for eugenics and is using Africa to do his experimentation. But it's also in America. And also we need to remember that when Salk went to Zaire, Jonas Salk, and he was experimenting on polio, he used the Zaire people as his guinea pigs. And that's the reason you'll never get statistics about how much AIDS is in Zaire, because it's just about 100% of the people, because they've experimented on everybody over there. Ebola started there. All these things start there. So what were they doing? They used green monkey tissue to grow the culture. And then what did we get? We got AIDS. And what is HIV and AIDS? It is a green monkey form of herpes, which is dormant in a monkey, but when it crosses over to a human, creates an individualized retrovirus that starts the HIV process. Well, this is well known, and so when this came out, they changed it from green monkeys to cattle and sheep, and then we started getting cattle and sheep diseases attributing also as part of the HIV process. Those huge welts and those horrible wounds all over their bodies. That is from sheep. It's a type of rot. So what do they do now? They'll admit this. They use baby fetal material as the protein to grow immunizations on. There's no such thing as an immunization or a vaccine that doesn't grow on the protein of human dead babies.
Wow.
That's why they'll tell you it's in every single
vaccine. Exhibit B of my complaint gives the Congressional Research Service's overview of the laws, extent law of what is legal or not legal to do fetal tissue experimentation. That is Exhibit B on in my complaint. So that everything I did for the judge was based on real law, and I just connected the dots, which made him very uncomfortable. But that what's interesting here, Douglas, is that at the same time that all this is going on, the American Center for Law and Justice, which is Jordan Sokolow, who is the J. Sokolow Connected Law Firm, who is Trump's attorney, represents many of the sort of off the beaten path religious or free thinking groups like the Jews for Jesus, right? Or, you have other religious groups, and you have the right to lifers in New York City are definitely off the wall, and they were brought under attack by de Blasio, right? And that they came heavily under attack, and the law firm came in to get a restraint of the city from them shutting down the storefronts that were inviting women to come in and actually give birth to their children, right? So that I ran across that after I filed the case already, and what they're asking for of Governor Cuomo is exactly all of the discovery information that I would have to ask for. So they've actually done the legwork, and it's nice to have a big law firm doing legwork, that they have under New York state law, it's called the Freedom of Information Law, not the Freedom of Information Act, so that they have to answer within so many days of all the correspondence between the Democratic National Committee, Planned Parenthood, and all of the various groups, and I'm already suing, right? So excuse me, basically, when they answer it, I'll be able to go to trial with the actual information. So I'm blessed from the standpoint that I've got this large law firm, the American Center for Law and Justice, actually doing my legwork.
I love
and
that.
That's a gift. That is a gift.
Oh,
it
that
really
is a gift. Because, you asking questions of members of Planned Parenthood in Discovery makes my heart leap for joy. Because, all we have
I don't have to. I have the Veritas project from a couple of years ago, asking the head of the organization with undercover camera, I'm in the business of selling body parts. Can you provide me any? And she's saying, yeah, we can get them we don't crunch it. We try not to crunch the stuff so that you have bigger pieces, right? So, the Project Veritas.
Oh, yes.
So I've got that. That's evidence. Then I've got a whistleblower came out a few months ago and essentially said, we are keeping fetuses born alive in order to grow them up so we can get more money.
Oh, my heavens, actually admitting it.
Yeah, I have that. See, I have all the evidence I need that they're harvesting human beings for the purpose of sale. All right? This is a commercial issue, which falls right under my emergency government and the Emergency Banking Relief Act. We exist without money. We exist with collateral based upon human beings registered in commerce, where they're human beings against the best interest of the rest of the world, which is the International Covenant for Civil and Political Rights, which came into being in the 60s, and we never adopted. In other words, it says in that there is a difference between a corporation and a human being. You realize that the Russians, when they have their new constitution in 1991, adopted the International Covenant, and they said that you cannot mistreat a human being, or you can't treat a human being the same as a corporation, right?
That's beautiful.
So that's part of my case. That's part of my law memorandum, which you can read the law memorandum on. I've got a new website up called SaveOurNewYork.com, and that we just got it running, and that I will have a blog there where people can actually put intelligence information on the blog so that we can move this thing forward. And my friend Frank, who's a programmer and who was actually born in Argentina, his father hunted Nazis in Argentina. Right? Joseph Mengele did not go to Argentina because his father would have hunted down the Nazi. Right? He worked for Juan Perón, and that Juan Perón, did not want these people hanging out. So anyway, Frank's father was a very interesting. He was a Trappist monk, a Trappist who in Trieste, and what Mussolini did was to go empty all the monasteries out and said, now you're a soldier, here's your gun, right? And, after you kill so many people, then they sent them down to Ethiopia, all these monks and these monastic, religious people to go kill people, right? So, that was a shocker. You can only kill so many people, and you can't go back to the monastery.
Well,
okay?
the Jesuits are they're pre-forgiven for killing people now.
Well, that's true. That's true.
They're pre-forgiven. That's a fact. They take a vow, and the Pope pre-forgives them. Now, I want to go back to the billionaires. The billionaires, we know, all these crazy billionaires, they all say they're going to live to be 180, 200 years old, live eternally. They're going to either put their mind into a machine or their machine into their mind or whatever, but all of them were doing experiments with fetal tissue because of epithelial cells, stem cells, can be used to look as if they are immortal. But that's only because epithelial cells, when they are in utero, have yet to be exposed to terrestrial forces, and so therefore they look as if they are immortal. So it has created an illusion, and the illusion has drawn in all these billionaires. So now the billionaires, they publicly admitted that they were taking blood from people, young people. They were supposed to take it from 18 years and older, but they were taking it from young people, and it supposedly made them feel better. Well, they've done tests on that, and they say that doesn't help at all. They've done tests on this flesh that is in the pills from China. Doesn't help at all. Matter of fact, it kills people. And it creates, what's that disease called? Kuru, the cannibalism disease?
Guru, yeah.
Okay, so these people, these billionaires, started having, and I pointed this out years ago, they started sending ships offshore. Gigantic scientific laboratories on giant barges. Amazon was doing this, Apple was doing it, Facebook was doing it, all the big ones were doing it. And no one knew what they were doing. It was said it was supposed to be for secret technology. No, it wasn't. It was because it was illegal at that time to take the stem cells and actually grow full embryos, which they were doing, and experiment with cloning, DNA manipulation, of course, but specifically, they were trying to demonstrate if epithelial cells, stem cells, baby tissue can extend your life. Now, you'll notice that all those ships, none of them are out there anymore. You don't hear any of these billionaires saying anything about going after stem cells now, do you? Because it's been proven.
Wasn't it the guy doing PayPal? Didn't the guy that started PayPal had these offshore ships?
Peter Thiel. Was it him?
Yeah, Thiel. Yeah. Thiel, yeah, that's the name.
That's what they were doing.
Yeah. You've got a great mind, Douglas.
It's illegal at that time, right? And so now they can clone. You know that they can clone humans now, as long as it stays. It doesn't go into fertilization inside of a woman. As long as it's in a petri dish, they literally grow human embryos, and then they take them and they use them to try to do experimentation. Now, they don't grow it for the purpose of trying to replicate a human, but because, unfortunately, a president can downgrade this law that governs this, and it has been downgraded to basically zero. It's now happening everywhere. They don't have to go out on ships to do it, but what they have found out is it's not helping. It doesn't help. Epithelial cells, if they worked, because this was supposed to be the cure for cancer, by injecting them into certain parts of the body, that it would in fact kill the cancer. No, it doesn't work that way. Now, I want to go back to the Chinese for a minute. The Chinese emperors, most of them, especially the further back you go, the more they all died of mercury poisoning. Why is that?
Oh, okay.
Because they believed it.
Why?
They believed it created eternal life, and so they experimented with mercury because it had this magical substance of being liquid and
alchemy.
Alchemy. Okay. So what happened? They all poisoned themselves. And what's happening?
I love it.
Yeah, that's what's happening now with this baby stuff. You know, you're going to get Kuru. You're not going to extend your life. You're going to die a miserable death. And I understand that this is one of the most miserable deaths you can die from, is having Kuru. And so, guess
look
what?
At Clinton.
Chinese, you're wrong again.
Huh. So God really smiles on all this stuff, huh?
I think God's not going to let humans take over for the divine functions of procreation. No, we can defile it as much as we want, but we cannot change the miracle.
Right. You know, I was thinking of Bakunin. Bakunin was the contemporary of Marx, and he actually took over the various political journals, and he was the nihilist, Bakunin, an important thinker. I don't think he survived World War I, but he was contemporary with Marx. But this whole thing of nihilism is really it's taken over. I mean, it's like it's sick stuff. You know, again, Exhibit B goes into what you can use fetal tissue for, and that's why I put it in the case. And that Judge Heard, he read this stuff, and it's like he had a disconnect. You know, there's no attorney would do what I'm doing. None.
Oh,
doesn't happen.
It would ruin them permanently, and then they couldn't be an esquire and be part of the monarchy that rules over the rest of us subjects. You know, I'm glad you're not a lawyer. You know, and it was one of the first things you told me. I do legal work. I am not a lawyer, and I never will be.
No, I wouldn't be caught dead as an attorney. You know, I probably would be dead, but
that's probably right.
Right.
You'd be representing the wrong side of that case.
Yeah.
Now, I just want to say again that the Chinese don't trust a thing they do, and the reason that the demon rats, the Democrat, Socialist, Fascist, Anarchist Party doesn't want a wall on the border, because those humans coming across are used
Exactly.
for basically human sacrifice, organ harvesting. They go right up California and all the way up through the state of Washington and Oregon, and then they go into Canada. We know exactly where they're harvested. We know exactly where they send the products. It mostly goes to China,
Right.
Europe, and places in the East. This is well known. So when you talk about a Pelosi, or you talk about a Gavin Newsom, or you talk about Maxine Waters, or you talk about Feinstein, they are 100% complicit with this basically human sacrifice of people coming across our southern border, also DACA babies and these pregnant women coming across the borders. Where do they end up? We know where they end up. They are human trafficked, and it is disgusting that it is so, but this explains why it's so acceptable to the Democrats to have no border.
And the Republicans.
And
And
some
the
Republicans.
Republicans.
Yes, and those traitors who are Republicans who all need to be voted out because they're not MAGA. But the demon rats, that's their standard fare each day of the week. And so when they passed a bill in Demon Rat, New York, which is so infested with Democrats in New York City, it's disturbing. It doesn't surprise me now, because it's a form of dark materialism that is the nihilism that you speak of, that is standard operating procedure for the demon rats in Washington, D.C., who are supporting human trafficking and organ harvesting coming across our southern border. So I want to thank you today, because you have really opened my mind to seeing the real causes behind this. And again, for all of our listeners, and for everyone out there that is following Christopher Earl Strunk, and that's a lot of people, because you've been doing this for a long, long time. And as you say, they know you when you come walking in. They got your name pinned up to the board. We want to thank you, because you put everything on the line for this. And people might not understand that. So go to his site, support him. I can tell you that it is well worth every second that you spend studying what it is that Christopher Earl Strunk and his friends are presenting. So again, Christopher, thank you for shedding light on this most horrible, demonic thing that is going on, and thank you for bringing light to the situation with your lawsuits.
All right. Well, you can keep up with us on saveournewyork.com. One word, saveournewyork.com, and or Private American Citizen. I don't advertise it on Private American Citizen, but it goes into this whole problem with the emergency government. I'm trying to urge Trump to get us out of this slavery that has been created starting under FDR with this Emergency Banking Relief Act. This is real stuff, and I will have some very high-level retired FBI and banking people testifying if the judge wants to really learn more. But I'm sure he doesn't want to know. You know, he's got his eyes closed and his ears plugged and his mouth sewn shut. But yeah, you keep. I'm having fun with this, but it's real serious stuff. Somebody has to do it.
That's a
and
fact.
That I appreciate the time you've given to this, because it is important and it's global, and Trump needs every bit of help he can get. This is, and babies do too, because there's nobody on their side, unfortunately.
Well, thank you for being on their side,
Yeah.
Christopher. Thank you for defending these unborn children who have just as much a right to be here, especially in America, as anybody else. So let's talk soon, and you can keep us posted on how these things are unfolding in the courts.
God bless. All right, thanks. All right,
Thank
bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.